What's up, Tweeners? Welcome back to another Tweener Tennis video here on the channel, and today we have a very special guest for you guys. We have Bryce from Brothers on Tennis as we discuss Jo-Wilfried Tsonga and his career as a whole. We wanted to bring someone on that could talk to us more about the impact that he had, and Tsonga being one of Bryce's favorite players and the Brothers on Tennis podcast favorite players altogether. We wanted to bring him in to talk about what his career meant on the impact on the sport of tennis and much more, and what he brought to the table not only as a tennis player but as a human being itself. I want to thank him for joining us, and I want to make sure that you guys do enjoy this video as well. So if you did enjoy this, make sure to show your appreciation by leaving a comment down below of what you thought of Jo-Wilfried Tsonga and his career, and leave a like on this video as well. Also consider subscribing, you guys. Over 50, not even 50, over 80% of you that are watching this right now are not subscribed to the channel. We're trying to get to 5,000 subs by the end of this year, so it would really mean a lot if you could hit that sub button with notifications turned on. And now enjoy our video about Jo-Wilfried Tsonga with Brothers on Tennis Bryce. This conversation that we're having today involves Tsonga. Tsonga recently announced that he is retiring at the end of this French Open, which basically guarantees him a wild card into the event. It would be really ironic if he didn't. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on Joe, because I thought you guys have always spoken highly of him. You guys have always reported on him. And I wanted to hear your thoughts first before we get into a more in-depth discussion.
Sure. When you first sent the message about, talking about Tsonga, I was immediately all over it because, like you said, Isaac and I both, from the Brothers on Tennis brand, are huge fans of both Tsonga and Monfils. And it's very interesting because Monfils we were aware of coming up as a junior because he was dominating at the junior level and was doing things that other players hadn't done before. But although Tsonga had a strong junior career, I mean, I think he was ranked number 2.
Very strong.
Yeah, he was definitely under the radar behind Monfils. But what it appeared to me, though, once they entered the professional ranks, that there was a baseline in Tsonga's game that wasn't necessary, that I didn't see in Monfils' game. Monfils, you saw some of the most miraculous shots and entertainment you'd ever seen in your life, but they weren't always translating into wins. You didn't always feel like Monfils could stand there at the baseline and go toe-to-toe with the top players in the game. Tsonga had a lot of the same flair that Monfils had, but he also had the substance. He had the big serve. He had the ground strokes that he could go with you toe-to-toe from the baseline. He had the hands at the net. He had the athleticism and the ability to cover the court. And put on top of all that, he looked like Muhammad Ali. Right? So he had everything going for him. And I just, to me, he really introduced himself on the scene. Was it 2008 or 2009? At the
2008, because that was the year he made Australian final, lost to Novak, and won the Paris Master 1000 title.
Right. And so in 2008, he introduced himself, and people started to say, like, hey, okay, this guy really has the potential to be a big player in the game. Now, Tsonga also was attractive to me from another perspective. As everyone I'm sure is well aware, in tennis, you don't see a lot, or especially then, you see a lot more now, people of color, right? So Tsonga, I mean, we knew by the name, where he was from, his look, that he was probably a combination of different cultures, right? We'll put it like that. But the African influence was very strong in him, and he did not shy away from that at all. So while I think Monfils and Tsonga were both of French descent, they were still I think the American crowd took a little longer to get behind them in terms of Americans that were looking for African Americans to emerge in the game. You know, we had Venus and Serena starting to really do big things on the women's side of the game, but you really didn't have the equivalent of that on the men's side. I mean, you had, I mean, Malavia Washington, you know, it made it to the finals of Wimbledon and played well, and James Blake played well, was never really a threat at the majors, but you know,
world number 4 too.
Yeah. So had overall very nice careers, but once again, we're not doing Venus and Serena type things. And Tsonga and Monfils were the type of players that looked like they had that level of talent to do that.
Yeah.
Something that I also appreciated about Tsonga, maybe even, and I'm not trying to make this a Tsonga versus Monfils. I'm saying a lot of that because they kind of came up in the same time.
They're in the same category.
Right. And they're great friends.
Yeah.
They're great friends. Like I was telling you before we started recording, I think there's only been a handful of players that have ever been legitimate threats to the big three or the big four. Like when they played them and when they played them on the biggest stages, they truly had opportunities to win. And that wasn't so true for Monfils, because I think, as we know, Monfils is 0 for 18 against Djokovic alone.
I remember that stat. It was it last year that they played, and the stat they showed was like 0 and 17. And then he lost, and it was 0 and 18 and made it even worse. It's like it just, the horrendousness doesn't end.
Exactly. And I tell you what, Tsonga has beaten each member of the big four. We'll throw Andy Murray in there at a major. And I tell you what, Tsonga actually gave, as much as I love the man, he gave me one of my biggest heartaches, because anybody that listens to our show knows that Isaac and our personal GOAT is Federer.
Yeah.
And I think it was in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, when Tsonga played Federer at Wimbledon, and Federer was up 2 sets to love. And I'm thinking, okay, you know, Tsonga, love you, but the king is here. We need to let him go ahead and do king things.
Yeah.
And Tsonga wasn't hearing it that day.
Yeah.
Tsonga was like, okay, we're going to bring this back and I'm going to win in 5. And I think they said it is one of the few times Roger has ever been up 2 sets to love in a major and lost, especially at Wimbledon.
Oh yeah. He's like creme de la creme tournament.
Right. So when you look at performances like that with Tsonga, and you look at, he's a wildly popular guy in the locker room. I've not had the pleasure of meeting him yet.
Yes, there we go. Put it out. We gotta get him out there.
Right. But everybody that I know that knows him has nothing but absolutely great things to say about him. He looks like he's a family man. But because of something that you said before I think we hit the air, when you look back at his history, he has had a significant injury almost every year. And you just wonder, in an almost Del Potro-ish type fashion. And granted, we understand management of the body is an aspect of the game.
It's very hard. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And we're seeing that with Rafa too, when he played with a broken rib? Fractured rib during his match against Fritz at this year's Indian Wells.
Absolutely. And you just wonder, what could Tsonga have done? What could he have done if he had not been subject to those injuries? Because he had shown he was one of that handful of people that in the majors could take out members of the big four.
I totally agree. And kind of going along those lines, and I don't want to interrupt you because this is awesome stuff. The amount, I'm going to start at 2004, and then I'm only going to go up to 2010. 2004, he had a herniated disc. 2005, he had 2 right shoulder injuries. 2006, he had a back and abdominal injury. 2008, he had to pull out of the French because of a knee injury. 2009 was a back injury, and 2010 was another back injury. And that's, oh my God, that's almost 12 years ago now. That's not even what he's gone through, because he missed most of the last 3 years because of injuries.
Yep.
So going along those lines of that quote, and I hate to say it, but that Delpo theme, because we're seeing that with Team now with his own wrist and his comeback always being pushed farther and farther back into this year. He had a career, or he's still playing as of right now, the time we're recording this. He's had a career where he's shown flashes of just brilliance and pizzazz that I don't think Monfils had, but at the same time, he's able to kind of make his own flashiness known on the court. And one thing that I will never forget about him is him bringing out the one-hander from short hops every time he would come to net, because I felt like it was one of those things where it wasn't like Steve Johnson, where he always hit a slice, or he would kind of do it every now and then, but he would do it on a way that you wouldn't expect it, because you would be going out wide and hit a short one-handed cross-court backhand winner. So Tsonga was one of the original entertainers in my mind when it came to that. And I'm going to say it as the Monfils era of showmanship, right, in the 2000s era to now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I have to thank Joe. And if I get a chance to meet him, I will do it in person. That whole one-handed backhand thing, I actually employed that in my own game, because when I first started playing as a child, I started off with a one-hander, and basically had a one-hander until I went to college. And then when I went to college, there was a guy that I just could not beat. He was like he was built like Monfils. He was like 6'4", he was wiry. He would come to the net and he would always come to my backhand, and I had a hard time passing him. And I remember I was at home watching the US Open, and I was watching Andre Agassi. And I thought his backhand was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. And I went out and I started trying to emulate it. Believe me, it was on a much lower level.
Hey, all works. It works.
Right. But I converted to a two-handed backhand. But this is where Tsonga comes in for me. There were still certain things that I could do very well as a one-hander. So I still had a good one-handed slice. And in certain situations, I like to come over the ball with one hand, especially if I'm taking out wide or whatever. But I was kind of putting myself in these boxes. Like, well, no, you're not a one-hander anymore. You're now a two-handed player. And watching Tsonga kind of gave me that mental license to say, I don't have to be just a one-hander or a two-hander. I'm a situational backhand guy. Now, if I'm just ground stroking at the baseline, I'm going with two at that point, right? Or if I'm in position for a passing shot, I'm going with two. But guess what? There are times to pull out the one-hander, and watching Tsonga do that situationally, I took that from him.
I think everyone kind of relates to that in some way, shape, or form, because you never really know. Like you said, you're always put into a box of one or the other, but that combination really did shock me for how people perceive the game, because it was never taught, but it just seemed so natural to him when it came to that area of play.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you, with all these injuries that he kind of, going back to that idea of where he might have been without these injuries, if he didn't have these injuries during his prime, and we'll have that prime be from 2008. What do you think? What were his years of prime, do you think? Because it's 2008 to what year?
I would say if you're not really including injuries, it would be that 8-year period of 8 to 16.
Okay. How many majors? And I feel like it's always a question that we ask, whether it's a player coming up or a past player in these scenarios, how many majors do you think he would have won in that 8-year span? And which one do you think would have been his best one to win?
Okay, so that's so of course the number, you know,
The numbers,
you can
yeah.
pull that out of the air. You know, maybe I think he would have fallen in that same category of like a Murray and a Wawrinka, maybe 3, maybe 4. I'm not going to go out here and say he would have won 8 or 9.
Yeah.
But because of Rafa's dominance at the French,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say he would have probably been most successful at the Australian. I think he probably would have cut into Djokovic's numbers more than any of the other ones. I think the 2 hard court, that one, I always view the US Open as like the really even one. Like everybody's got a shot to win the US Open, no matter what your style of play is.
Interesting.
Obviously the grass favors a certain style, the clay favors a certain style, and even the hard courts in Australia are different.
Very different from the US Open.
The US. But so the US always remains a kind of a grab bag for me.
Okay.
But I would have probably put him more with the Australian. And hey, I don't think it's a coincidence that was the one and only major final he made it to.
And so he's won a total of, I believe it's 18 career titles. His biggest one came in Paris, where he beat Nalbandian in 3 sets. Actually, 2. I stand corrected. Toronto was the other one against Federer. And like you said, I think before we were recording, Federer, like that's another person that cut into Federer's dominance. 7-5, 7-6 in Toronto. And what surprised me when looking back at all his wins, his tournament wins, how out of the 18, how many do you think were indoor?
Oh, I think he was a great indoor player. I think because he won Paris, and if I'm gonna guess out of the 18, I would say half.
12.
You know what? I was gonna say 12, but I said that's a lot. I'm gonna go with half. Wow. Okay, got it.
So 12, which kind of makes him, and you can see why Australia favored him a lot more. And I understand this theme of why he had Australia to be like his best major, because the courts felt more like, I guess, and people can correct me on this if they're watching this or leave this in the comments below, Australia felt like a more indoor type court compared to the US Open or any other hard court that happened in the US. Because with that kind of speed and just ability to hit that ball flat out, especially on his forehand side, how flat he can hit that from above his shoulder, that's what really made him special and dominant on the court.
Right. I agree with you. I think conditions suited him well. And it's kind of ironic, you know, with all the health issues that he had, you know, the Australian is one of the tournaments you have to be the healthiest at, because it's during their summer and it's hot, and you know, we see a lot of retirements typically there at the Australian. But yeah, I definitely think the Australian is where he would have been the most successful with the majors. And here, let me throw this out there too.
Yeah, please.
With the promise of really being able to win any of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. It felt like he was, if we were, well, now that betting's kind of getting implemented into tennis a lot more, and that's just a whole different conversation.
Right.
It's just a whole different conversation. But in terms of betting odds and favorites for each tournament now, because we're looking at them so much, Tsonga definitely would have been in that top 10 category of favorites to win the Australian Open, I think, every year between that 2008 to 2016 period.
I totally agree. I completely agree.
How would you describe Tsonga in one word?
Class.
And can you break it down for us?
Yeah, and once again, we're in a period now where we're seeing the top players melt down and smashing rackets against chair umpire chairs and all that kind of stuff. And it's not that It's not that Tsonga never expressed his frustration on court. I mean, because he absolutely did. But I think I view him in many ways a lot like how I view Federer. So much to me of Federer's aurora or his mystique or his whatever is about how he carries himself.
Okay.
Once again, when he was very young, when he was younger and first starting off, he wasn't the Federer,
Well, of course,
that we know now.
Of
but
course.
I think both of them, if I were to compare the two of them, so well liked, so well respected, not only as people but for their abilities on the court. Amazing competitors. I think conducted themselves with grace on and off the court. I don't know, and you may have the stat in front of you. I don't know if Tsonga ever won the sportsmanship award any of the years or not. But one of the things I did appreciate about and you had to take him seriously as much as you liked him, and you had to take him seriously because he could take the racket out your hand.
Yeah.
And so that's why I use the word class. I just think he carried himself very well, was a professional. And look, him, Del Potro, any of these other players that got really hampered by the injuries, they could have walked around with a chip on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And use that as an excuse or a reason to have kind of a salty attitude. But you didn't see that from him. And the players that you see that are universally beloved, like where you can't even really tell what country they're from because they're received the same way wherever they go. He's one of those type of guys.
I totally agree. And as much as we want him to have the sportsmanship award, Federer won it from 2004 to 2009, then Rafa in 2010, then Roger from 2011 to 2017, and then Rafa from 2018 to 2021. So as much as we wanted that to happen, there's no physical or scientific way for him to ever get that award.
Right.
Which is, I mean, yeah, like there could be, like Delpo could be on that list twice too. Like there are a lot of people that could have won that, but when it comes to fan favorites and sportsmanship awards, like Federer's won the fan favorite since 2003, and Federer won in 2021, and he played 3 matches? Like
exactly.
That makes zero sense. So it's interesting to see that kind of statistic, and I think and I wanted to follow that up with, and we talked about it a little bit at the beginning too, when you first describing Tsonga in this atmosphere, with the idea that Tsonga and Monfils started kind of this trend outside of, not even trend, I can say, but besides Venus and Serena, when you see two colored men come into a sport that's predominantly white and predominantly European and predominantly white American, and them breaking the barriers, can you talk about a little bit what their impact was? Because we've seen it with FAA too. He's admitted that Tsonga and Monfils were players that they grew up watching. Like Tiafoe has even said that as well. Watching Monfils play has been one of my best moments. Like, can you talk about their groundbreaking kind of promotion of the sport?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and one of the things that we have learned as a global community as of late is when it comes to representation, a lot of it has to do simply with optics, right? You have to be able to, sometimes there used to be a phrase, or the phrase something about you have to be able to see it before you can believe it.
Yeah.
And I will speak, as an African-American child coming up as a tennis player in Cincinnati, Ohio. I did not see.
Yeah.
I mean, many other people that look like me, when I was in these clinics and at some of these clubs, I would be the only person there that looked like me. And when you see someone that even looks remotely like you on television and they're being successful, the majority sees that as well. So although you may not see another person of color in your club, on the television there in the club is a Tsonga or a Venus or a Serena or James Blake, you know, or Malavia Washington or Monfils, you know, that still brings you into the room, right? And so this also ties with when you just asked me how to describe Tsonga, and I used the word class. I was always very proud to see him on the court. He was, you know, and this is probably a poor example to use, but could you imagine if we had a person of color on the tour and they were acting like John McEnroe? You know,
yeah, it's a not a double standard, but you can see if those actions were reciprocated. And I think the perfect example in today's and current events is when Zverev took his anger out on a chair umpire's chair, directing his anger towards basically a person, which could be considered assault.
Right.
If Serena did that or Monfils did that, or like it would be a totally it would be a different headline from every single solitary newspaper or media outlet, and two, the punishment would be completely different. At least in my opinion, it would be.
Well, they would start off in cuffs, so I mean, it would be that different. Because remember how people lost their mind with Serena at the U.S. Open when she was just using words. You know. So anyway, but the point of course, Tsonga is that you never saw him like that. He carried himself well, and so he, along with those other list of players that you named, the players of color, they helped usher in, and I'm not just talking about for African Americans, I think they helped usher in a time for more people of color to be included in the sport globally. You know, we saw, you know, the Lee Nan, the Asian, you know, influence come in, and Kei Nishikori, and all of that coming through, you know. So
even Osaka at some point with the combination of Japanese, Haitian, raised in America, but represents Japan.
Absolutely. So, you know, where Tsonga may not have all the majors on his resume, you know, that we would have liked to have seen, I do think that he was a critical person and player and representative during the early to mid or all the way through today, 2000s, as representing people of color in the game that could perform at the highest levels.
I 100% agree, and I feel like it's a very difficult topic to discuss when it comes to that kind of aspect, because the idea of tennis being, I guess, and we're moving away from it, the country club aspect of what the sport is and where it's come from. So to see the diversity, and not only Black athletes, but within the other communities as well, the Asian communities and all these others, the impact that it's made has kind of resonated a longer way, in a broader way than we've thought.
Right. There's something else that I want to mention too, and this goes for both, again, Tsonga and Monfils. I hate keep tying them together, but they really were part of the same movement. Even within France, if you will remember, when they were coming up, they were not the prodigies that people were talking about. It was Gasquet. Gasquet was the one who was touted as being, out of that group of players, the one who was going to, and don't get me wrong, he's had a very nice career.
We can always bring up the challenger stat that he had before he turned 18 too with Rafa. It's like, that's the thing that Gasquet was known for. I think he won 7 challengers before he turned 19. Like, I think that was the main thing that people were looking at. And he had, and kind of that quote unquote class with that one-hander. That's what everyone was looking at.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I like Gasquet. I have no problems with him, and he's had a nice career. He's in that, I think, that 500 career win club, which is very exclusive, that I would have never thought that he was in until I saw the stat.
Again, like, you never know.
Right, exactly. But and Tsonga, I believe, is just outside of that. I think he's at like 487 or 488 or something like that.
Question.
But I love the way that Monfils and Tsonga kind of, when you think tennis now out of France, they surpassed him by far in popularity and expectation and even some results. And whenever you have to kind of come from, you kind of have what I call the Jim Courier syndrome, when you weren't the chosen one, like Agassi was the chosen one, but you use that as motivation and drive to succeed. I give them credit for that as well.
I totally agree. And to answer your question, he's at 4, according to Wikipedia, the most reliable source on the internet. His career record is 467 wins with 236. 467. Okay. So unless he wins
it's not happening, dude.
Like 4 tournaments straight and the French, maybe. Never really know.
No. Well, look, I watched this match this week, of course, and
against
so let me do another comparison. Okay. So we had 2 players that were coming back this week. You had at least on the big stage. You had Tsonga and you had Wawrinka. And so
please,
the difference I saw between the 2 of them, Wawrinka looked like he's just he's out of sync right now. He's got to just tighten up a few things. He's got the power on the shots. His movement looks pretty good. The serve is there. He just looks like he's rusty.
He needs more match practice, and he did that with the wild card in the Challenger, and then he played another follow-up, I believe, for Monte Carlo, and then he played Monte Carlo where he actually played the talent that he wants to be at right now.
Right. I think I think Wawrinka can be a top 15, top 20 player again, and I expect him to do so if he doesn't get injured.
Yeah.
Tsonga, on the other hand, when I was watching him, when you're watching your old favorite and it's kind of them late matches in their career, and
I know exactly where this is going.
you don't see the same sting off of the shots, I mean, look, y'all, now once again, our followers know how we are Williams sisters fans for life.
Yeah.
Right. But I tell you what, I can barely muster up the energy to watch Venus anymore, because and props to her for living her life and doing what she can do. But, when you're watching from a competitive standpoint,
you're just
she's starting to look a little bit like a shell of herself. And I felt like I started to see a little bit of that with Tsonga in this match. I saw glimpses of old Joe,
100%,
but not where I can imagine him going into these tournaments playing Sinner and Alcaraz and Tsitsipas and
no. And I agree with you in that aspect. And it's not like you can't, and I hate to say this, but it's like it's like trying to teach an old dog new tricks, because he's trying his best to kind of keep it up. And even against a guy like Cilic, who's become the seasoned veteran at this point, and which is shocking, who kind of rejuvenized his career in the past couple months, but that's not taking away from the fact that Tsonga didn't look like he could keep up with the sheer ground strokes of Cilic today.
Right.
I believe he lost 2-2. So I can't imagine what he's going to perform like against the younger generation that's supposedly taking over right now. And it's ironic that you say Venus because Serena's coming back at Wimbledon this year. So we never really know what's going to happen. So that's another thing that's just a whole nother conversation to have. But but for Tsonga, I think he knew it was time. And we saw that with his kind of speech on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's just trying to at least keep his body in shape for the French. And I think that's where he's that's his swan song / that's where he's going to give 100% for 2 weeks. And if he's able to make it 2 rounds, I think that would be a great way for him to kind of finish his career, to just get past 1 round and kind of show the French audience that he can go out with a bang.
I'm going to try to catch him at his first match.
See, your confidence is really high with him.
Well, no, because you never know.
No,
he could end up, getting someone like Tennis Sangren in the first round and beating the crap out of him. Or he could end up, because he's going to have a wild card.
So he's going to get a round 1 versus
Alcaraz.
Well, the good thing is he won't face a high seed until the second round if he wins, which is good. But if he's getting that wild card, anyone in the 50 to 100 range is still dangerous. And it's still the idea like, I can still play a 30 seed and still get my ass kicked. That's the problem.
Davidovich Fokina.
Who saw that coming? Who saw that coming? I did not.
Let me tell you what my mom asked me last night. She said, does he have a shot to beat Novak? And I said, you know what? With Novak being rusty right now, he actually has the game to do it.
Yeah. The
problem is he looks up to Novak. And typically those players go out there and they get drove. So Korda
and Rafa, and that's like the perfect example from this year. Like you blow a 5-2 lead, multiple match points, and you're like, oh shit, I'm up against Rafa. What's happening?
And see, I thought and I'm sorry, I know we kind of have, this means we need to talk more, Phil.
Yes, because it's a small tangent. That's why we talk for half an hour before I hit the record button, and then we continue the conversation live.
Exactly. But in that match today, I thought when Djokovic won the second set, I was like, okay, here we go. Mm-hmm. So props to Alejandro for resetting and bringing the fire against his idol.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think can you imagine if FAA plays Tsonga at the French and that's like the end of his career? It's like, it's not even the changing of the guard. It's just like, it's just, it's not even a slap in the face. It's just irony at its finest in tennis.
Do you know what? In all honesty, I know this, it's kind of like, I care about who he goes out to. And like FAA would feel good. To go out to FAA would feel good. Yeah, because FAA looks like him a little bit.
Has the same physique.
Yeah, he's admitted that Tsonga was his idol.
Yeah.
He's got a great deal of respect for him. Mm-hmm. I would want it to be somebody like that than him going out to like Korda.
I feel like he's going to go out to Lorenzo Sonego or like Fonini. Like and as an Italian, like I don't mind that because I'm rooting for all the Italians, but at the same time, you could see him lose to a random 50 to 100 player that you're like, really? Now? Yeah. Now you play really good tennis?
Right.
So it's just that kind of idea. And for me, seeing a guy like Tsonga, and honestly, and we said this before we started recording, he'll probably get into the Hall of Fame. And
you think so?
two
without
medals,
winning a major?
two medals at the Olympics, a Grand Slam final, and winning 2 Masters 1000s,
And he has a Davis Cup
Davis Cup and Hopman Cup.
and Hopman Cup. Yes.
So
Cornet.
it's
Yeah.
shocking. So
That.
it's I think he'll scrape it.
You do? Okay.
I think so, because compared to other players, like you have Davis Cup captains that are in the Hall of Fame, and would you say he had, and this is again totally different conversation, this is what we need to like have like for our members only channel, for would you pick him over say a 5-time doubles Grand Slam champion to go in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, it depends who it is. Oh man. Oh,
You see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The individual success, and sorry to doubles players because I love watching doubles and I'm an advocate for doubles, but in terms of paper and the popularity, who would you pick if it was stupid watch? Who would you pick? Who would you rather see in the Hall of Fame?
Okay, can I answer your question with another question?
Sure, as long as I can answer it.
Okay, so who would you think would get in first, Tsonga or like Gaston Gaudio, who has a title, who has a French?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't even know who the second person was that you said, so I'm going to go Tsonga.
Gaudio was the one who won the French the year that Coria was supposed to win it.
Oh, it was the year that Coria choked.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, don't know what he looks like, but I know what Coria looks like. So it shows you like, but that's just my generation, right? We're not going that far back to know someone that won a single French Open when they like Corda's dad's in the Hall of Fame, right?
I think so. He should be because he won a major. He
was he number 1 in the world?
I don't think he was ever number 1.
Okay.
I think he got up to number 2 at the
That's what I thought, because like it comes down to that aspect where it depends on the generation of who's voting. It depends on the generation on who's voting and what are we taking into account? Because I've asked people in the tennis industry, does the Hall of Fame matter? And some of them say yes, some of them say no. But it seems like the plethora of stuff inside the Tennis Hall of Fame overshadows who's in the Hall of Fame. Because you're looking at the first rackets, you're looking at Billie Jean King's first shoe with Adidas. You're looking at Roger's shirt that he won his only French Open in. Like you're looking at that stuff rather than the wall of people that are in it.
Right.
So Tsonga for me, but I think he will. Whether or not he deserves that is a whole nother story.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting because, you know, we have found, it seems like with the, well, okay, this is one thing we know for sure.
Okay.
In terms of the French Federation, he will be in their Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. The international one, you know, because he's so well liked and he has really good overall stats, maybe, but I think that whole winning a major thing is kind of like
that's the benchmark.
In, shoe out thing. That's the way it looks to me. Because remember, you get voted into the Hall of Fame in different categories. So if you're looking at being a player, coming in as a player, you basically need to have the hardware. Now, if you're being voted in as a coach or a contributor, or I forgot the other category that they have, you know, those are different. They have different criteria.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at being voted in as a player, how many players have we seen be voted in that did not win at least one major? and they weren't a part of a group like the Nine, or we're not talking about a group or an organization being voted in. As an individual player.
And I'm just looking at least the nominees for this class, the 2022.
Okay.
Cara Black from Zimbabwe, Ferrero of Spain. I think he definitely deserves it.
Yeah.
Ivanovic, Carlos Moya. How many titles did Moya win for singles? For Grand Slams.
Didn't he win two?
Two Frenches?
No, an Australian and a French.
Did he really win Aussie?
I think he won an Australian and a French.
Flavia Pineda, because of her U.S. Open run.
Right.
Did Lisa Raymond win a singles Grand Slam?
Oh, Lord, no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say it like that, but...
That's like the most polite way of saying fuck no and just saying, nah, you don't deserve it.
She won a slew of doubles ones,
but won a ton amount of Grand Slam doubles.
Yeah, I mean, and she was at her height of her career, at the peak of her career, she was good for making it to like the quarterfinals of a tournament singles, and I think she got a
fourth round of every Grand Slam or better.
Okay, yeah, but I don't think she ever was even in the semis of one.
No, a quarterfinal of Aussie and Wimbledon, but reached number one in doubles.
Oh yeah,
and won 4 tour level finals, and won. Oh, there we go, and the mixed titles as well. 1, 2, 5 mixed, 6 regular, 4 tour finals. So
yeah, no, she was a beast in doubles.
That's what I mean. Like she deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for her doubles.
Yep, exactly. So when you name the people,
he won silver in the Olympics for doubles.
Okay, but the people that you just named that are under consideration for this year, what's the one thing they all have in common?
Grand Slam winner.
So that's where I think
it's
Tsonga
really
could potentially miss out. Because we got to get Ostapenko in there, and we got to get Gaston Gaudio in there, and we're going to have to get Raducanu in there, of course.
Well, Raducanu I see like going into the Hall of Fame as being the first female woman, first female from the United Kingdom to win a Grand Slam since what, the 50s?
Yeah.
So that's like a guarantee.
Oh, well, no, not the 50, because it was Virginia Wade, right?
Yeah. What year was that?
I think that was like in the 70s.
Like still, it was a really long time ago. It was like 50 years ago. So it's like she's gonna get in,
right?
So it comes down to that. So to kind of wrap up this great conversation, I mean, Tsonga is an unbelievable, and I'm gonna use the word entertainer and tennis player and human being because of the amount of kind of energy and vibrancy brought to the sport. And for those that watch soccer as well, he reminds me of Ronaldinho, where he always have a smile on his face no matter what. At least for me, that's kind of how I see him in the retrospect. And when I went to the 2019 Lyon Open, I just remember him being in the press room and just the smile he would always have answering a question. I think that's what the impact he made on me and as a tennis player as well.
Oh, yeah. And for me, like I said, I think him ushering in a new generation of representation of people of color, a new generation of athleticism on the court, and also another generation, a continuation, I should say, of the gentlemanly type manner that he had on and off the court. And I'm gonna miss him for sure. I'm definitely gonna still keep trying to meet him.
You will. I think if he ends up coming, if he starts coaching immediately and makes it to the City Open, you'll definitely meet him. I can totally see him doing that, especially with the All In Academy. But Bryce, thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure to check out Brothers on Tennis with all their links down below in the description. Instagram, YouTube channel as well, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So everything that you guys need to know about them, I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. And Bryce, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil. I really have enjoyed talking with you.
Awesome.
Take care.
You too.